A former Minister of Aviation, Osita Chidoka, on Tuesday said the FCT Minister Nyesom Wike took a fundamental mistake by verbally abusing a military officer on lawful duty. In a viral video obtained by our correspondent, Wike engaged in a tense exchange with a military officer at the Gaduwa district of the FCT. The minister was seen accusing the military officer of unlawfully guarding a parcel of land allegedly linked to a former chief of naval staff. Wike, who questioned the military's claim to the property, also called the officer a fool. However, in a statement titled, Minister Wike, Power, Process and the Rule of Law, Chidoka said Wike diminished the Federal Republic of Nigeria by verbally abusing an officer in uniform. He said, and I quote, "Any law enforcement officer in uniform or plainclothes represents the president and the sovereignty of the Nigerian state. To abuse such an officer is to diminish the authority of the republic itself." Minister Nyesom Wike's decision to personally enforce a directive at a disputed site was a fundamental mistake. In constitutional democracies, power operates through institutions, not imposed. Executive authority must be exercised or adjudicated through the court, ministries, and lawful instruments of state, never through confrontation. No matter how justified a grievance, a minister cannot become an enforcer that violates the very idea of ordered government. In a democracy, ministers act through process, not presence. A formal communication to the Minister of Defense, whose office oversees the armed forces, would have sufficed, not the officers. If the officers were on illegal duty, the established disciplinary systems would have addressed it. When a minister trades words with a uniformed officer acting under orders, lawful or otherwise, it corrodes discipline and confuses hierarchy. The officer's duty is to obey the chain of command, not verbal instructions on a roadside. The minister's duty is to act through lawful channels. The minister should apologize to the officer for using abusive language. It is not acceptable behavior. The conduct of the DSS protective details was equally unprofessional. Their responsibility was to extract their principal from a rancorous and potentially dangerous situation, not to escalate it. Security officers must remember that their loyalty is to the state, not to personalities. Also reacting to Burotai, a former chief of army staff, criticized the minister while urging him to immediately issue an apology to President Bola Tinubu as the commander-in-chief of the Armed Forces of Nigeria and the officer whose honor was violated. In a statement, Burotai said, "The incident poses a clear threat to national security and requires an immediate and serious response." His public disparagement of a uniformed officer of the Nigerian Armed Forces transcends mere misconduct. It represents a palpable threat to national security and institutional integrity, the statement treats. A minister's verbal assault on a military officer in uniform is an act of profound indiscipline that strikes at the core of our nation's command and control structure. It deliberately undermines the chain of command, disrespects the authority of the commander-in-chief, and grievously wounds the morale of every individual who serves under the Nigerian flag. Such actions erode the very foundation of discipline upon which our national security apparatus stands. This cannot be dismissed as political theater. It is a reckless endangerment of national order. This action by Wike is clearly an indication of undermining the federal government's authority. Our nation's security must come first. It is time for decisive action, not politics of military bashing. The integrity of our armed forces demands nothing less, he said.